Welcome to John Carter's Stories. My name is Thomas, and at 58 years old, I thought I understood people. I really did. 40 years in the hotel business, working my way up from scrubbing pots in a Toronto restaurant to owning 5 boutique properties scattered across the Maritime provinces. But nothing, absolutely nothing prepared me for what happened 72 hours after I said I do to a woman I thought I knew. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My wife Sarah died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It took her 8 months, and when she left, she took a piece of me with her. I honestly believed I'd spend the rest of my days alone, managing my properties, visiting my son Michael in Vancouver, and that would be it. That would be my life, and I'd made peace with that. I really had. Then I met Diane at a charity auction in Halifax. She was 51, stunning in this understated way, Not flashy, just elegant. She had this incredible ability to make you feel seen, really seen. She told me her husband had passed away 4 years earlier, sudden heart attack, leaving her to raise their 19-year-old son Connor on her own. She worked in event planning, she said, though work had been inconsistent lately. We started slow. Coffee at little cafes, long dinners where we'd talk for hours, weekend trips along the coast. She seemed genuinely fascinated by my stories about the hospitality industry, about the guests I'd met, the challenges I'd faced. I told her I managed the Harborview Inn in Lunenburg, which was true. I just conveniently left out the part where I actually owned it, and the 4 other properties, and the investment portfolio that would make her eyes water. Why did I hide it? God, because I'd learned my lesson the hard way. After Sarah died, I dated someone who transformed completely when she discovered my financial situation. The warmth in her eyes turned to dollar signs overnight. Every conversation became about investments, about our future, about what we could buy together. It made me feel sick, honestly, like I wasn't a person anymore, just a bank account with a pulse. So when I met Diane, I decided to be just Thomas, a night manager, a guy with a decent income, a small suite at the inn, nothing fancy, living simply. Diane never seemed concerned about money. She'd insist on paying for dinners sometimes, never expected jewelry or expensive trips, seemed perfectly content walking on the beach or cooking together at her apartment in Dartmouth. Her son Connor was polite enough when we met, a typical 19-year-old more interested in his phone than small talk, but I figured that was normal. After 9 months together, I proposed during a foggy morning walk along Peggy's Cove. She cried, actually cried, and told me she'd stopped believing happiness was possible for her. We planned an intimate wedding, just close family and a handful of friends. Her cousin Rachel flew in from Calgary, and my son Michael came from Vancouver with his wife. We held the ceremony at the Harborview in our event space overlooking the harbor. I had instructed my staff to treat it like any other booking, to call me Mr. Patterson in front of everyone. My assistant manager, James, who'd been with me for 12 years, gave me this look, this concerned, almost pitying look, but he respected my decision. Diane looked absolutely radiant in an ivory dress. Connor stood beside her in a navy suit that looked expensive, brand new. Her cousin Rachel smiled throughout the ceremony, but there was something in that smile, something I couldn't quite identify, something that made my stomach twist just a little. My son Michael squeezed my shoulder before I walked down the aisle and whispered, "Dad, you absolutely sure about this?" I nodded. I was sure. God help me, I was sure. We exchanged vows. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. Everyone applauded. We had dinner, we had cake, we toasted with champagne. Diane held my hand under the table and told me how grateful she was, how excited she was to build our life together. She'd already terminated her lease in Dartmouth, she said. We'd be living full-time at the inn, in my suite. That night, our wedding night, we went upstairs to the suite I'd occupied for 4 years. It was modest by the inn standards, just a bedroom, a bathroom, and a small sitting area, but it had this incredible view of the harbor, and I'd always loved it there. It felt like home. Diane looked around, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not disappointment exactly, but close. Something calculating. The next morning, I woke to find Diane already awake, fully dressed, sitting at the small table with papers spread everywhere. Connor was there too, which confused me because I hadn't realized he'd spent the night at the inn. "Morning," I said, reaching for the coffee pot. "What are you two working on so early?" Diane looked up, and her face was completely different. The warmth from yesterday, from every day of the past 9 months, it was just gone, erased. "Thomas, we need to discuss our living arrangements." I sat down slowly, confused. "What do you mean?" "This room is inadequate for a family," she said, her voice crisp, businesslike. "Connor graduates college in a few months, but until he finds his own place, he'll be living with us. We require at least a 2-bedroom suite." "Diane, I'm working here. This is the accommodation provided for the night manager position. I can inquire about a larger space, but—" "That's the other issue," she interrupted, and her tone made my blood run cold. "I've been thinking about your career trajectory, Thomas. You're 58. Don't you think it's time to consider retirement? Or, at minimum, transitioning to a day position? Night shift work is extremely hard on older individuals." Older individuals. The way she said it made me feel ancient, decrepit. Have you ever had someone completely change on you overnight? Drop a comment below. "I enjoy my work," I said carefully. "The schedule suits me." Connor spoke up for the first time. "Mom's right, Thomas. You need to start thinking long-term, our long-term." Something cold settled in my chest. "Connor, this is between your mother and myself." "Actually," Diane said, sliding a document across the table, "Connor's been helping me understand tenancy laws and spousal rights. Did you know that as your legal spouse, I have certain entitlements regarding your living situation?" I stared at the paper. It was a formal letter addressed to the management of the Harborview Inn, demanding immediate accommodation in a 2-bedroom suite, citing spousal rights and implying discrimination. "Diane, you can't just demand a different room like this. That's not how any of this works." "Then perhaps you need to have a serious conversation with your employer. Or perhaps you need to evaluate whether this job is truly worth maintaining." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. This wasn't the woman I'd married literally yesterday. This was a stranger. Where is this coming from? "I'm being practical, Thomas. We're married now. We need to think strategically about our finances, our future. You've mentioned you have some savings. Perhaps it's time to utilize them. We could purchase our own place, something larger, more appropriate. You could take early retirement." "My savings are for emergencies and actual retirement." "And your wife and stepmother aren't important enough to invest in?" Her voice sharpened like a blade. "I left my entire life in Dartmouth for this, Thomas. My apartment, my routine, everything. The absolute least you can do is provide adequate housing for your family." Connor nodded along, his face smug. "It's pretty basic stuff, man." The way he said man, no respect, no stepdad, just this dismissive man, made my skin crawl. I stood up. "I need to check on some things at the front desk." "You do that," Diane said coolly, "and perhaps inquire about that larger suite, or start seriously considering your alternatives." What would you do in this situation? I'd love to know. Keep watching to find out what I did next. I left that room feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. In the hallway, I nearly crashed into James, who was carrying fresh towels. "Thomas, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I said automatically. Then, "Actually, James, can we talk privately?" We went to my office, the one Diane had no idea existed. James closed the door and waited. "Something's very wrong," I said, my voice shaking. "Diane's acting like a completely different person. She's demanding a bigger suite, interrogating me about my savings, pushing me to retire. This started this morning, less than 24 hours after we got married." James's expression darkened. "Thomas, I didn't want to overstep yesterday, but Michael asked me to watch out for you. He was worried about how quickly everything progressed with Diane." "Michael talked to you?" "At the reception.
He said something felt off about the whole situation, asked me to contact him if anything seemed concerning. He pulled out his phone. Should I call him now? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, call him. While James made the call, I sat at my desk, trying to process what had just happened upstairs. The woman in that suite wasn't Diane. It was like a mask had been ripped off the second the marriage certificate was signed. James handed me the phone. He wants to talk to you. Dad? Michael's voice was tight with worry. What happened? I told him everything. Every word, every demand, every cold look. When I finished, there was this long, heavy silence. Dad, I need to tell you something. Yesterday at the reception, I overheard Rachel and Connor talking outside by the dock. They didn't know I was there. Rachel said something like, "Just be patient, he'll break eventually." And Connor laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Mom's got this routine perfected." My blood turned to ice. A routine? Perfected? Dad, I think this might be some kind of scam. I didn't want to ruin your wedding with just suspicions, but now... He paused. Have you searched for Diane online? Her full name? No, I trusted her. Why would I... Can you do it right now, while I'm on the phone? I turned to my computer with shaking hands and typed Diane Morrison, Halifax, Nova Scotia. The first few results seemed normal. A LinkedIn profile for event planning, some social media accounts. Then I scrolled down and my heart stopped. Halifax woman under investigation in elderfraud case. I clicked it, my hands trembling so badly I could barely control the mouse. The article was from 3 years ago. It detailed an investigation into a woman named Diane Morrison, suspected of targeting financially stable older men through dating applications and charity events. She would marry them quickly, establish legal spousal rights, then pressure them for access to their finances or property. In one documented case, a 65-year-old man had transferred his entire house to her within 4 months of marriage. The investigation had stalled due to insufficient evidence. Many victims were too embarrassed to come forward or press charges. "Michael," I whispered, "I'm reading an article about fraud, about her." "I know, Dad. I found it last night after everyone left. I'm so sorry. I should have shown you before the wedding, but I found it so late, and I didn't want to make accusations without being absolutely certain." "It's okay, son. It's okay." My mind was racing, fragmenting. I need to think clearly about this. "Dad, I need you to be extremely careful. If she's done this before, she might escalate the situation. Can you come stay with me in Vancouver for a few days, just to get some distance? And leave her here, in my inn? No, I need to handle this very carefully." After I hung up with Michael, I sat with James and explained everything. To his credit, he didn't say, "I told you so," though God knows he could have. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "I want to understand her endgame. She doesn't know I own this place. She thinks I'm just a night manager, pulling maybe $60,000 a year. What exactly is she planning?" "Only one way to find out," James said. "Let her think she's winning. See what she reveals." The con was real, and it was just beginning. Stay with me. I spent the next 2 days playing along, acting defeated. Diane kept pressuring me about the bigger suite, about my savings, about retirement. I told her I'd think about it, that I needed to discuss it with management, that these things required time. On the 4th day after the wedding, I returned to the suite to find Connor sitting on my bed, going through my drawers, actually rifling through my personal belongings. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Looking for your banking information. Mom needs to understand what we're working with financially. Get out of my things now. Look, Thomas, you can make this easy or you can make this extremely difficult. Mom's your legal wife now. She has rights to know about your financial situation. We can do this cooperatively or we can involve lawyers. Your choice. Get out." He stood up, and I realized for the first time how much bigger he was than me. Younger, stronger, more aggressive. "You know what your problem is, old man? You think you're still in control here, but you're not. Mom owns you now. Legally, financially, every way that matters." He walked past me, deliberately bumping my shoulder, and left. I stood there shaking, not just with anger, with fear, real fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that article, about the other men Diane had targeted. How many had there been? What had happened to them? Had they all just given in eventually? At 3 in the morning, I went to my office and started making calls. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Patricia Wong, who Michael had recommended, someone who specialized in fraud cases. I gave her everything I had on Diane, Rachel, and Connor. 4 days later, Patricia called me. "Thomas, you need to sit down for this." What she told me made me physically ill. Diane Morrison wasn't even her real name. It was Diane Fletcher. Connor wasn't her son. He was her nephew, 26 years old, not 19. Rachel wasn't her cousin. She was her actual sister, and they'd been running this exact scam for at least 7 years. The pattern was always identical. Diane would target financially comfortable men over 55, usually widowers or divorced men who seemed lonely, vulnerable. She'd construct an entire false identity, complete with backstory, documentation, everything. Rachel would play various roles depending on what the situation required. Sometimes cousin, sometimes old friend, sometimes colleague. Connor was the enforcer, there to intimidate if the victim resisted, to threaten, and according to Patricia's research, to sometimes escalate to actual violence. They'd marry quickly, then immediately start pushing for access to money or property. If the victim resisted, Connor would increase the pressure. Threats, sometimes physical confrontation. Most victims eventually capitulated, either from fear or embarrassment, or both. Several had gone to the police, but the legal complexity of spousal rights made prosecution extremely difficult. "How many?" I asked, my voice hollow. "That I can confirm, 9 men in the last 7 years. But Thomas, there could be more. These people are professionals. They're dangerous. I think you should go to the police immediately." "Not yet. I need more evidence." "Evidence for what? You have enough right now for fraud charges. I need evidence that will put them away for years, and I need to make sure they can never do this to anyone else again." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "What are you planning?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they want, or at least make them believe I am." "You won't believe what happened next. Keep watching."
The next day, I came back to the suite looking completely defeated. Shoulders slumped, eyes down, the whole performance. Diane looked up from her laptop with that cold, calculating smile I'd come to recognize. "Thomas, good. Sit down. We need to have a serious conversation." I sat. Connor emerged from the bedroom, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, like some kind of enforcer. "I've been thinking about everything you said," I began, keeping my voice tired, resigned. "About retirement, about our future, about providing for this family." Diane leaned forward, her eyes lighting up. "Go on." "You're right. I'm 58 years old. I should be thinking about slowing down, enjoying life. And I want to provide for you, for us. I really do." "I'm so glad you're finally seeing sense, Thomas." "I have about 180,000 in savings," I said. The lie came so easily it surprised me. "I was thinking we could buy a small house somewhere, maybe Truro or New Glasgow. Something modest but comfortable, you know?" 180,000, Diane repeated slowly. "That's a good foundation." Foundation, not amount. Foundation. "Well, Thomas, property prices in the Maritimes have increased substantially. We'd need at least 350,000 for anything decent, anything appropriate for our needs. Do you have other assets? RRSPs? Investment accounts?" "Some, but they're locked in until I'm 65, for retirement." Connor spoke up. "You can withdraw from an RRSP early. There are penalties and tax implications, but it's absolutely possible." "I'd lose almost 40% to penalties and taxes." "But you'd still have 60%, Diane said smoothly, like she was explaining something to a child. "And think about it, Thomas. We could have a real home, a place that's truly ours, a place where we can build our future together. Isn't that worth some financial sacrifice?" I pretended to consider this, letting the silence stretch.
Maybe, but there's still the inn to consider. I can't just quit without notice. They depend on me. James isn't ready to take over the night operations completely. Diane's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw pure rage flash across her face. The inn doesn't own you, Thomas. You've given them more than enough of your life. It's time to prioritize your family, your actual family. What if I approach management about a severance package? I've been here 4 years. They might be willing to offer something for a smooth transition. How much? Connor asked immediately. Maybe 45,000? Diane and Connor exchanged a look, a very specific look. That would bring us to maybe 225, Connor said, doing the math aloud. Still significantly short of what we need. What about your son? Diane asked suddenly, casually. Michael, didn't you mention he and his wife are doing quite well? Some kind of tech business? And there it was, the real endgame revealed. They weren't just after my money, they wanted to pull Michael into this too. I couldn't ask Michael for money. That would be— Why not? Diane interrupted, her voice sharp. He's your son. This is for your happiness, for your future. I'm sure he wants his father to be happy and secure. Family helps family, Thomas. That's how it works. I stood up slowly. I need to think about all of this. Don't think too long, Connor said, and his voice was pleasant, almost friendly, but there was this edge underneath, this threat. Mom's been very patient, but we need to start making concrete plans, real plans with real timelines. They wanted everything, but I had a plan of my own. That night, I met with Patricia Wong and a lawyer she'd brought with her, a man named David Chen, who specialized in fraud and elder abuse cases. The good news, David said, spreading documents across the conference table, is that with what they've said about pressuring you to liquidate retirement funds and involve your son financially, we have clear evidence of financial coercion and attempted fraud. The bad news? Because you're legally married to her, spousal privilege, shared assets, it creates legal gray areas. Defense attorneys exploit those gray areas very effectively. What if we catch them explicitly threatening me on recording? David shook his head. Recording conversations without all parties' consent is illegal in Nova Scotia. Anything you recorded secretly would be inadmissible and could actually expose you to criminal charges. What if I consent to recording my own conversations in my own residence? Still problematic legally. But, David paused, thinking, if the conversation happens in a public area of the inn, that's different. Public spaces have substantially different privacy expectations, especially in a commercial establishment. The inn has security cameras throughout, audio and video, in the lobby, the restaurant, the conference rooms. Patricia smiled. Of course it does. I explained my plan. David looked uncomfortable, but eventually agreed it could work. Patricia would help me set everything up. The next morning, I told Diane I'd spoken with management about early retirement. They're willing to offer a severance package, $45,000, like I estimated, but they want to meet with both of us to discuss the transition and make sure we're aligned on expectations. Both of us? Why would they need to meet with me? Well, you're my wife. They want to ensure we're both comfortable with the terms, that we understand the implications. It's their policy for any long-term employee leaving with a spouse. Insurance reasons, liability, all that corporate stuff. It was complete fabrication, but Diane accepted it immediately. When? Tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. We'll meet with the general manager in the lobby conference room. The general manager would be James, playing a role. We'd have cameras and audio recording everything from multiple angles. Diane nodded slowly. Fine, we'll be there. Connor, too? Why would Connor need to be there? Well, he's been very involved in our financial discussions. I thought he might want to hear this directly, for transparency. Something flickered in Diane's eyes. Calculation. All right, Connor can attend. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept reviewing the plan, looking for weaknesses, for things that could go wrong. What if they suspected something? What if they became violent? What if the recording failed? At 2 o'clock the next day, I was sitting in the lobby conference room with James, who was dressed in an expensive suit, playing the role of general manager perfectly, professional, slightly cold, bureaucratic. Diane and Connor arrived exactly on time. "Mrs. Patterson, Connor," James said, shaking their hands with practiced corporate formality. "Please be seated. Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "We're fine," Diane said crisply. "Let's discuss business." "Of course, Mr. Patterson has been a valued member of our team, and we want to ensure this transition is handled professionally and fairly for everyone involved. However, there are several details we need to address before finalizing any agreement, such as the severance package is contingent on Mr. Patterson signing a comprehensive non-compete agreement and agreeing to specific confidentiality clauses." Diane frowned. "Confidentiality clauses? He's a night manager, not the CEO. Even night managers have access to extremely sensitive data, guest databases, revenue reports, security protocols, vendor relationships. It's all protected information." "Fine, whatever. What's the actual number?" $45,000, as discussed with Mr. Patterson. However, there is one significant complication we need to address." "What complication?" "Mr. Patterson's employment contract includes specific provisions regarding his living arrangements. Because his accommodation is directly tied to his employment status, he would be required to vacate the premises within 30 days of his final working day." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. "Excuse me?" Diane's voice was ice. "It's standard policy for employer-provided housing. When employment terminates, housing access terminates. Those are the terms in the original employment agreement Mr. Patterson signed." "That's absolutely ridiculous. We're married. I have spousal rights to that accommodation." "Ma'am, with respect, this is private commercial property. The suite is employment-based accommodation, not marital property. When the employment relationship ends, the accommodation arrangement ends. Those are the terms." "Then Thomas won't retire," Diane said absolutely. "We'll stay in the suite and he'll continue working. Problem solved." "Mrs. Patterson, with all due respect, your husband is 58 years old. The night shift work is physically demanding. We've had some concerns about his performance recently, his energy levels, his attention to detail." I told James to say this even though none of it was true. I wanted to see exactly how Diane would respond. She didn't disappoint. "Are you threatening to fire him?" Her voice was pure venom now. "I'm suggesting that retirement might be in everyone's best interests. However, if Mr. Patterson chooses to remain employed, he'll need to meet the exact same performance standards we require of all our staff." "This is bullshit," Connor said, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You're trying to force an old man out of his job and his home simultaneously. That's elder abuse. That's illegal." "Please sit down, sir. I'll sit down when I damn well feel like it." The confrontation was about to explode. "Stay with me. You need to see this."
Connor took a step toward James, his body language aggressive, threatening. "Here's what's going to happen. Thomas is going to keep his job and his suite, and you're going to stop this harassment about retirement, because if you don't, we'll lawyer up so fast it'll make your corporate head spin. Age discrimination, wrongful termination, hostile work environment will bury you in lawsuits." "Connor, sit down," Diane said sharply, but there was approval in her eyes. But Connor was fully committed now, riding the wave of his own rage. "You think you can push people around because you manage a hotel? Thomas has rights. His wife has rights. You can't just throw us onto the street like garbage." "Nobody is throwing anyone anywhere," James said calmly, professionally. "We're simply explaining the contractual terms of employment." "Contractual terms, my ass! This is discrimination, pure and simple, and we won't tolerate it." Diane stood up. "Thomas, let's go. We don't have to listen to this corporate garbage." "Actually," I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. "Actually, I think we do need to listen." "What are you talking about?" Diane's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I mean, we need to be realistic here. If I lose this job, we lose the accommodation. That's just the reality of the situation."
then you're not losing this job. End of discussion. But I'm exhausted, Diane. I'm 58 years old. I want to retire. I want to use my savings to buy us that house we talked about, build a real life together. With what money? Your $180,000 won't buy anything remotely adequate. Then we'll get a mortgage or look at cheaper areas or nothing, Connor interrupted. This is insane. You're just going to roll over and let them push you around? I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone. The solution is simple, Diane said, and her voice had turned to absolute ice. You tell them you're staying. You keep your job, you keep your suite, and we figure out the money situation through other means. What other means? Your son, Michael, you said he's doing extremely well financially. He should want to help his father. Family helps family, remember? I'm not asking Michael for money. Absolutely not. Why not? Diane's voice rose. He's your son. He should want you to be happy and secure in your retirement. Diane, no. Her expression transformed into something ugly, something I'd never seen before. We're married now, Thomas. That means we make decisions together as a unit, and I'm telling you, we need more money. Either you get it from Michael, or you liquidate your retirement funds, or you find some other way, but you will make this work. Do you understand me? And if I don't? She leaned in close, her voice dropping to something cold and sharp as a blade. Then maybe I made a serious mistake marrying you. Maybe I need to rethink this entire arrangement. And trust me, Thomas, you really don't want me to do that, because I know lawyers who will absolutely take you apart in a divorce. You'll lose everything, your savings, your dignity, everything. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. Connor stepped closer to me, invading my space deliberately. Listen, old man, my mother has been incredibly patient with you, but that patience is running out fast. You're going to do exactly what she says, or things are going to get very, very uncomfortable for you. Very uncomfortable. Is that a physical threat? James asked sharply. Take it however you want to take it. James stood up. Gentlemen, Mrs. Patterson, this meeting is over. I'm going to have to ask you all to leave the premises immediately. We're not done here, Diane snapped. Yes, you are, and I'm formally asking you to leave the property now. What? Diane's face flushed with pure rage. This is a business open to the public. You can't just kick us out. I can absolutely ask you to leave when you're being disruptive and threatening. Mr. Patterson can return to his suite, but you two need to exit the building immediately. Richard lives here. I live here. You have no authority to remove me from my own home. I have authority to remove you from the public areas of this hotel. Mr. Patterson may return to his private suite, but you two are leaving. Security will escort you if necessary. Connor's face twisted with absolute rage. He grabbed James by the collar of his suit jacket. You don't tell us what to do, you corporate piece of... Everything happened incredibly fast after that. James pressed a panic button on his phone. 2 security officers appeared from the back hallway, moving quickly but professionally. Connor shoved James hard, and the security officers immediately moved in. Don't you touch me, Connor swinging wildly, his fist connected with one officer's jaw, a solid hit that snapped the man's head back. And then it was complete chaos. Diane was screaming, high-pitched and furious. Connor was fighting both security officers, landing punches, kicking. Furniture crashed over. I stood there watching it all unfold, knowing every single second was being recorded from 3 different camera angles. When the RCMP arrived 12 minutes later, Connor was in handcuffs, still shouting threats and obscenities. Diane was demanding a lawyer, her voice shrill and desperate. The security officers were giving detailed statements, one of them holding ice to his swelling jaw. And I was sitting in my real office, the one Diane had never known existed, watching the entire confrontation play back on video. Crystal clear, perfect audio. Threats, coercion, assault, all of it documented. The The police took statements from everyone. I told them everything about Diane's fraud history, about the threats, about the financial coercion. I gave them Patricia Wong's contact information and the complete file she'd compiled. Names, dates, previous victims, patterns of behavior. A constable named Officer Mackenzie looked at me with something like sympathy mixed with respect. "Mr. Patterson, I have to ask, why didn't you come to us sooner?" Because I needed evidence, real, undeniable evidence. I needed them to reveal exactly who they were. That was extremely risky. They could have hurt you. I know, but I also know how difficult it is to prosecute spousal fraud. I needed something absolutely concrete, something a jury couldn't ignore. He nodded slowly. "Well, you got it. Assault on security personnel, uttering threats, attempted extortion, combined with your wife's prior history and the pattern Patricia uncovered, the Crown will have an exceptionally strong case." Diane and Connor were arrested that night, formal charges filed within 48 hours. Rachel was picked up 2 days later in Calgary when police connected her to the conspiracy through phone records and financial transfers. Justice was finally coming, but the real story was just beginning. The preliminary hearing happened 4 weeks later. I sat in that courtroom and listened as the Crown prosecutor methodically laid out the entire pattern of fraud. 11 previous victims came forward, men who had been too ashamed or frightened to speak up before. Together, over an 8-year period, Diane, Connor, and Rachel had stolen over $2.3 million. $2.3 million from vulnerable people who just wanted companionship, who'd wanted to believe in love again. My lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Ross, handled the annulment of my marriage. It turned out Diane's divorce from her actual husband had never been legally finalized, which meant our marriage wasn't even valid. That made things substantially simpler, at least from a legal perspective. Michael flew up from Vancouver and stayed with me for 10 days. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted my instincts harder. I should have pushed you." "You did trust them, son. You tried to warn me. I'm the one who didn't listen." "Why didn't you?" I thought about that for a long time. Because I wanted to believe I could find happiness again. I wanted to believe someone could love me for who I actually am, not for what I have. I wanted to believe the loneliness could end. "It will, Dad, with someone real, someone genuine." Maybe, or maybe not, but either way, I learned something important. The trial was scheduled 7 months later. In the meantime, I focused all my energy on helping the other victims. 4 of them had lost their homes, 2 had lost their businesses, another had depleted his entire retirement savings and was now working at 73 just to survive. I established a victim support fund, contributing $750,000 to start. It wasn't nearly enough to restore what they lost, but it was something. It was a beginning. I also hired Patricia Wong full-time to investigate similar fraud operations across the Maritime provinces, to identify patterns, to warn potential victims, to work with law enforcement. James found the whole thing fascinating. "You're really going after these people, like a mission." Someone has to. The police can only do so much with their limited resources, but private investigation, victim support, legal assistance, public awareness, that can actually make a real difference. "You're a good person, Thomas." "I'm a lucky person. I could afford to be fooled. I had resources to fight back. Some of these other victims, they couldn't. They lost everything." Keep watching. The trial was about to reveal even more.
The trial lasted 4 weeks. 23 days of testimony, evidence, victim statements. I sat through every single day of it. Diane showed absolutely no remorse. She sat there in her conservative courtroom outfit, her hair pulled back, looking like someone's respectable aunt. She claimed she'd actually loved me, that everything had been a genuine misunderstanding, that Connor had acted independently without her knowledge or approval. Connor blamed everything on her, said she'd manipulated him since childhood, that he was just following orders, that he'd been afraid of her his entire life. Rachel claimed she'd known nothing about any scams, said she was just a supportive sister who'd been deceived too,
who'd believed Diane's stories about falling in love. The jury didn't believe any of it. How could they? The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, recorded conversations, testimony from 11 victims, the documented pattern spanning 8 years. The verdict came back after 6 hours of deliberation. Diane, guilty on all counts. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy. 12 years. Connor, guilty on all counts. Fraud, assault, conspiracy. 9 years. Rachel, guilty of conspiracy and fraud. 7 years. When the judge read the sentences, I felt this strange mixture of relief and emptiness. Justice had been served, absolutely, but it couldn't undo what had happened, couldn't restore those years the victims had lost, couldn't heal that betrayal. After the sentencing, one of the other victims, a man named Robert, came up to me in the courthouse hallway. He was 71, walked with a cane, had lost his family home to Diane's schemes. "Thank you," he said simply, tears in his eyes. "Thank you for not being afraid to speak up, for fighting back." "I should be thanking you for being brave enough to testify." "I wasn't brave. I was angry, humiliated. But now," he paused, composing himself, "now maybe I can start to move forward, start to heal. We all can. We will." That night, I stood on the balcony of my suite at the harbor view and looked out at the harbor. Sarah had loved this view. She used to stand here with her coffee every morning, watching the boats, the sunrise, the seagulls. She would have known what to say right now, would have had the perfect words to make sense of everything that had happened. "I miss you," I whispered to the empty night. "But I'm okay. I'm going to be okay." My phone rang. Michael. "Hey, Dad. Just wanted to check in. How you doing? Really doing?" "Better than I expected, honestly. It's over. They're convicted. The victims are getting support. Life goes on." "That's good. Really good. Listen, Amanda and I were thinking about coming for a visit next month. Maybe spend a week at the inn, bring the kids, make it a family thing." "I would absolutely love that." "And Dad, maybe while we're there, you can show us the other properties, the ones Diane never knew existed, the ones you built with Mom." I smiled. Actually smiled. "Yeah, I'd like that." After we hung up, I stayed on the balcony for a while longer, just thinking. Somewhere out there, someone else was probably being targeted by con artists just like Diane. Someone else was being lied to, manipulated, set up for heartbreak and financial devastation. But at least now there were 3 fewer predators in the world, and a growing network of survivors who were learning to protect each other, to share information, to fight back. Tell me in the comments, and if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Was it enough? No. Could I have done more? Acted sooner? Been smarter? Probably. But I'd done what I could with what I had. And sometimes that has to be enough. I went inside and closed the balcony door. Tomorrow, I'd return to managing my properties, to building the victim support network, to living my life with my eyes wide open. Tonight, I'd just be grateful. Grateful to be alive, to be free, to be surrounded by people who actually cared about me for the right reasons. My son, my staff, my real friends. And maybe, just maybe, someday I'd be ready to trust again, to risk my heart again. But next time I'd be smarter. Next time I'd listen to those warning signals, those little inconsistencies, those moments when something feels off. Next time I'd remember that the best way to find out who someone really is isn't to test them with deception. It's to be honest from the very start and trust that the right person will accept you exactly as you are. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and raised it to the empty room, to the ghosts of mistakes and lessons learned. Here's to truth, I said aloud, my voice strong and clear, and to being wise enough to recognize lies when they're staring you in the face. The harbor whispered outside my window, waves against the dock, seabirds calling in the darkness. Life went on. The earth kept turning. And so would I. I'd hidden my wealth to my new wife, and she'd tried to destroy me for it. But in the end, she'd taught me something invaluable. Money reveals who people really are. It can't create character where there is none, and it can't buy the one thing that actually matters most in this world: genuine human connection, built on honesty, respect, and real love. I finished my whiskey, set the glass down, and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. An older man, yes, wiser now, definitely. Scarred, but not broken. Still standing, still fighting, still believing that somewhere out there, goodness exists. And that has to be enough.